My dad forced me to quit my dream job. Now he tells everyone I'm just lazy and living off him. The first time my dad called me lazy in public, he did it with a hand clapped around my shoulder like I was a trophy he could aim at a room. We were at the Legion Hall for my Aunt Rose's retirement. The ceiling fans were barely moving, the smell of coffee and potato salad, and the DJ had paused the oldies so people could make speeches. When it was Dad's turn, he took the mic and started with what sounded like pride. How he'd built Roy's Hardware from a single aisle and a ledger. How family shows up when it matters. How my boy Daniel is back home. Then he tilted the mic toward our table and said, he's figuring himself out. Kids these days, smart, but no hustle. He's living with me for now. We'll make a man out of him yet. Laughter. Not mean-spirited, but loud enough to move through me like heat. I looked at my plate because looking up would mean seeing who was nodding. He gave the mic back like he hadn't thrown a stone. Afterward, cousins I hadn't seen since Christmas smirked and asked what I did these days. My phone pinged with a text from my manager in the city. Thinking of you. Still a spot here, when you're ready. Doors never closed. The pit in my stomach, shame, betrayal, disorientation, didn't have words yet. It had a face, my father's, relaxed and content, taking congratulations on his speech like he'd rescued me from a life where I'd drown without him. Here's what the room didn't know. 2 months earlier I'd signed an offer to join a documentary production house I dreamed about since college. I'm 26. I'd interned anywhere that would let me hold a boom mic, and after years of freelancing I finally had a real role, junior producer on a long-form investigative series. The kind of work that pays late and demands early mornings, and keeps you awake with purpose. I told Dad on the phone from my apartment, pacing between the stove and the leaning bookcase, that had survived 3 moves. He'd been quiet for a long beat. He said. That's something. I'd swallowed the urge to fill the silence with statistics about the network's reach, the team's track record, the way the camera operator had cried happy tears when she heard I'd been hired. It's good, Dad. It's stable. Benefits. Responsibilities, he said. Then, listen. Your mother's blood pressure is all over the place. Miguel's kid broke his arm. Miguel can't come in for at least 6 weeks. The city is digging up Main Street starting next week, and nobody's walking past the store. I need hands I can trust. Family. Just a few months. We'll get the store through the summer, and you can do your film thing in the fall. He made it sound like seasons, like weather, like I could step out and step back in, no losses, no cost. The next morning he called again, faster, more urgent. The bank wanted updated paperwork, his bookkeeper had retired, a supplier was threatening late fees, the health department had left a notice because someone had left a mop bucket in front of the stockroom door. We're underwater, he said. I can't do it alone. He didn't say the words I heard anyway. If you don't come, you're choosing strangers over us. He didn't say the other words I carried. I paid for your brakes last year, when your car died. I loaned you money that Thanksgiving, when your freelance checks were late. I kept you afloat. He didn't have to. Each favor became a bead on a string he wrapped around my wrist. I told my new employers I needed a short delay, maybe for weeks. They were kind, even generous. Family first, of course, and I could hear in their voices the dread of losing a hire they liked. Dad called the owner of the production company himself, and invited. I didn't know that part then. He framed it as coordination, a father acting on behalf of a son who was a bit overwhelmed. He used his home voice, reasonable, slightly amused, like he was smoothing a wrinkle in a shirt. You can't call them, I'd said when he mentioned reaching out. They need to hear a grown man, he said, not some kid who thinks a passion is a job. At the time, I let the sting slide because I could still see the finish line. 1 month, then 4 weeks became 6. 6 became 10. I kept telling the production house some new version of my father's disaster. A delivery truck had clipped our awning. The card reader had started adding fees to every transaction. Someone had shorted us on a pallet of screws. Every small business problem became the next reason I couldn't leave. I opened and closed the store, took inventory, replaced a row of switch plates a kid had rearranged into a smiley face, learned which regulars needed a joke, which needed silence. I carried water bottle refills to an elderly couple, so they didn't have to lift. I did good work. I was proud of that. At night, I fell asleep to the hum of the store refrigerators we'd never gotten around to moving out of the garage. Dad tracked my hours in a notebook, said we'd square up when the dust settles. I didn't see a paycheck. He paid my phone bill, to keep things simple, and let me move back into my old room, while we find our rhythm. When I asked about setting up payroll, he brushed it off like a fly. Paperwork kills mom and pop shops, he said. I'm not letting the government in here because you don't like the word later. My mother, Anne, floated around the edges of these conversations, refilling coffee, patting Farms like a seal of truce. When I'd push, she'd say, "Not now, Danny, your dad's head is full. Let the storm pass." The night of Aunt Rose's party, storm felt like code for habit. Dad's face glowed under the fluorescent lights, like someone who'd earned their comfort with a story that cast them as the only adult in the room. I stood near the fire exit until the speeches ended. When he finally drifted over to me, he smelled like cologne he only wore to funerals and weddings. "I didn't mean lazy, he said. You know how people are. If I said you were running the shop, they'd ask about money. I don't need them sniffing around my books." I kept it light. "You said I'm living off you, aren't you?" Every muscle in my face tightened. "Because you told me to be here." He shrugged, a quick up down, like a dealer folding a losing hand. "You made a choice. Family or fantasy. You're here. Be here." The next week, my manager from the production house called and I took the call in the alley behind the store. Near the stack of broken pallets we told ourselves we'd take to the dump next time. He sounded tired. "We need to move forward, Dan. This hurts, but we're going to fill the role. Stay in touch." "This is temporary," I said, even as the word felt false. "It was supposed to be a month." He hesitated. "Your father told us you decided it wasn't the right fit." "He what?" "He said you needed stability, not flights and late nights, and that you were going to help at the family business for the foreseeable future." He was persuasive. "He said you were grateful." The alley tilted under my feet. "I didn't say that. I never said that." "I'm sorry," he said softly. "We thought we were respecting your boundaries." After I hung up, I stood there with my mouth open, and the metal door digging into my shoulder blades. I went back inside, past Mrs. Kemp comparing hose adapters, past the pegboard of drill bits, to the little office where Dad kept his calendar, and a photo of me and Claire on our bikes when we were 8 and 10. He was counting the deposits in the drawer. "You told them I turned it down." "I told them what they needed to hear to stop calling and confusing you," he said. "You want me fielding all your adult responsibilities now too." "It was my life, Dad." "Your life is here," he said, not unkindly. "Be grateful someone wants you." When I told Mom that night in the kitchen, she pressed her fingers to her lips as if holding something in. "He shouldn't have called," she whispered. "He wanted to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" "A career." "From disappointment," she said. "From running yourself ragged for someone else's name on a screen." "It was my dream, Mom." "Dreams change." She set a plate of toast on the table and looked at me with wet eyes. "We need you." That's how the story took root. Not as something I agreed to, but as something everyone around me repeated until my objections seemed like noise. At church, Mr. Fenn said, "Good to see you back at the shop, son." Real work. Steady work. At the town council meeting, where Dad argued about street parking, he joked into the mic about pulling my boy out of a dead-end media thing. He said it with a grin and a nod and the room laughed. And every time it happened I felt the shape of my own spine change, curved toward him, braced against a wind that didn't stop. Near the end of that 10th week, Claire, my sister, drove up from the city and hugged me hard in the driveway, then looked at the second-hand grill Dad had dragged out and said, "So, this is your life now." She'd always been Dad's sparring partner, quick with comebacks he respected. When I told her about the call to my job, the way he'd rewritten my choice in front of an entire room, she whistled under her breath. "He always loved the myth of himself more than the truth." "That doesn't mean he gets to drag you into it." "Can you talk to him?" "He thinks I'm soft," she said. "He respects people he can pin." "You'll have to pin him." That same night, I went looking for proof I wasn't hallucinating. I searched my email for something from HR that could undo his story, some thread I could pull. That's when I found it. An old voicemail transcription sent to my inbox automatically from months back, when I'd set up my phone to mirror messages. It was from Dad to my manager, the day after I'd signed my offer. "Hi, this is Mark Roy, Daniel's father," he'd said. "He's grateful for your confidence, but we've discussed it and he needs to focus on his responsibilities at home. The city is brutal on kids like him. He can't afford what you're offering. I hope you understand." He sounded like a man balancing dignity and humility, the exact performance that makes strangers conspire with you. I played it twice, then a third time, phone pressed to my ear, my heart beating so hard I could hear the flutter in the audio. It wasn't just that he'd called. It was the, we've discussed it. We need to focus. We hope you understand." A committee I hadn't joined had sent regrets I hadn't felt and shut a door I had wanted so badly my chest ached with it. When I went to the living room, Dad was watching the sports recap, bare feet on the ottoman he forbade anyone else to use as a footrest. I stood between him and the screen. My hand was steady. Somehow, when I hit play, the room filled with his voice. He didn't flinch. He muted the TV with one thumb. "You snooped through my messages now. It came to my email. You knew that. You set it up when you put the store's account on my phone." He stretched, vertebrae popping. "If you're waiting for an apology, don't." I cleaned up your mess. My mess. You make big promises to people with real jobs, then freeze. I saved your face. You're welcome. For a second, the room turned white at the edges, like all the blood in my head had gone somewhere else. You took my life and made it your story. You could have said no, he said softly, like he was coaxing a dog out from under the table. But you didn't. I stood there, listening to both of us breathing, and understood I was going to have to break something to put myself back together. The morning I decided to stop being the supporting character in my father's monologue, the shop's bell was broken. It jingled twice for every person who walked in, some stuttering mechanical hiccup we'd been meaning to fix. Each double ring was like a countdown. I opened at 8, stacked a new shipment of paint thinner in the locked cabinet, and printed 3 copies of my offer letter from the production house. I also printed the transcript of Dad's voicemail, highlighted the "we," and placed both in a folder with the 11 pages of notes I'd kept on my hours since the day I moved back home, right down to the time I watched the store while Dad slept off a migraine in the back office, and the night I mopped after a pipe burst and soaked the PVC aisle. At noon, I called the regional legal clinic and asked about wage theft. The woman on the phone didn't gasp or judge, or make me feel like I was betraying anyone. She simply asked if I'd been paid, if I'd been scheduled, if I'd been discouraged from seeking other work. When I described the "we" in my father's voicemail, she whistled the way Claire had, but quieter. You can send a demand letter, she said. It's not court. It's a request to pay what's owed. Sometimes that's enough. And if it isn't, then you decide whether to file a complaint with labor. I can't tell you what to do, but write everything down. Memory is a slippery friend. I hung up and wrote, for 3 hours between customers, every detail I could exhume from the last 10 weeks, receipts, dates, names of suppliers I'd negotiated with, who had seen me cover shifts, who had heard Dad say, later. I texted Claire and she replied with a screenful of fire emojis. Then another text. Sorry, no emojis. I'm proud of you. Call me if you need backup. Dad came in at 4 with a sack of burgers and an energy like he'd just won a fight no one else knew about. Busy. Enough, I said. We need to talk. That phrase, he sighed. Can we just eat? I'm sending you a demand for my wages, I said, and I want you to correct the story you've been telling people. He set the burgers down and scowled. What story? That I'm lazy. That I'm living off you. That I chose to leave my job. You did. I chose to help. You chose for me to lose. There's a difference. He took a bite, chewed like he was buying time, swallowed. You're ungrateful. I'm tired, I said. There's a difference there too. He leaned back in his chair, the legs creaking. All I ever did was keep you alive. You took credit for making me a man, and stole the moment I became one. I put the folder on the counter, and slid the top page toward him, the offer letter, my name crisp at the top, the salary numbers circled. He didn't look at it. I slid the transcript next. The highlighted line lit like a flare. He glanced, then pushed both pages back with 2 fingers as if they were sticky. You want me to be the villain because it makes you feel brave, he said. Okay, I'm the villain. You going to cry to the government now? I'm going to ask for what I'm owed. You're owed discipline, he said. You're owed a kick in the pants. And I'm owed the truth, I said. Right now I'll settle for a paycheck. The bell did its double ring, and 3 contractors in dusty overalls shuffled in, choosing the awkwardness of being customers buying bolts while a father and son reenacted the slow-motion implosion of their family. Dad pasted on his customer face, the one that could sell 20 feet of chain, with a story about a dog that figured out how to open the gate. He delivered their bag with a wink, and, as if remembering the best part of a joke, added loud enough for the room, my boy here, still trying to decide what work looks like. He'll learn. I felt something cold settle in the space between my ribs. I pulled out my phone, opened the voicemail audio, and, when the room was clear again, pressed play. He reached to mute it. I moved my hand away. We listened to his voice telling my manager that we had decided. We listened to the little click at the end, the signal that the decision had been final. What do you want, Daniel? He asked. When the recording ended, for the first time in weeks, he sounded almost small. I want you to stop telling my story like I'm the punchline, I said. I want my wages, in writing, with dates. I want you to tell Aunt Rose, and the council and anyone else you broadcast to that I didn't quit anything. You made a call I didn't consent to, for your convenience, not my safety. And I want you to look me in the face, and say those words out loud. His jaw moved, muscle working like he was chewing gravel. You're my son, he said finally, as if that answered a question I hadn't asked. And I'm a man, I said. Those 2 labels can exist together or not at all. He laughed then, but it landed wrong, like a note bent too far. You think a letter and a recording make you right? You think life is paperwork? I fed you. I let you sleep in my house. I took you in when the world spit you out. The world didn't spit me out, I said. You did. He threw his hands up, the gesture he used when a vendor tried to tack on a fee. Fine. Here's the truth you want. I didn't think you'd last a month in that job. I did you a favor. You panic when people need you. You freeze at choices. You're soft. I left the city because you asked me to, I said, voice steady in a way that surprised me. And I stayed because you lied. The next days moved like a track laid right in front of my feet. I drafted the demand letter with the clinic's template, attached my hours, and sent it certified to the address he used for invoices. Claire drove up on a Wednesday and stood behind me while I slid the envelope through the slot at the post office like I was feeding a strange, hungry animal. Back at the shop, Dad didn't speak to me except to ask for SKU numbers and ring up sales. At dinner, Mom pushed peas around her plate like she could move the conversation with the same fork. On Friday the letter must have arrived, because Dad stormed into the store at 9 with the envelope torn open, paper crumpled in his fist. You want to embarrass me, he said, voice thick. I want to be paid. You want to destroy what I built. I want you to stop building it on me like I'm scaffolding. He crumpled the letter tighter, white edges biting his palm. You always were dramatic. I learned from the best. He stood very straight, like he does when he's about to lift something heavy. Get out. Mum, who had been restocking light bulbs, gasped. Mark. He wants to be a man. Let him be one somewhere else, Dad said. Pack your things. Be out by tonight. I felt the place inside me that had begged and bargained go quiet. Okay. I walked home, past the maple tree that had split in a storm when I was 12, past the cracked patch of sidewalk Dad had always said he'd fix once the city stops. In my room I filled 2 boxes and a duffel, the trophies I'd won running the mile, a notebook with sketches for a documentary about the town's dying river, a snow globe Claire had brought me from a college trip. I left the poster of the film festival because the tape would tear the paint. Mom stood in the doorway with a hand over her mouth. I told him not to call them, she said, tears making her mascara soft. I told him he'd lose you. You told me I was needed more than I was wanted, I said, and the words surprised us both. I wanted you, she whispered, every day. Say it louder, I said, but not unkindly. She tried, breath catching. I wanted you. Dad was in the driveway when I carried the boxes out, arms crossed like a gate. He didn't move when I set the first box down, then the second. He watched me load my friend Evan's hatchback, watched me put the duffel on top, watched my life collapse into a Tetris that barely held. When I closed the trunk, he spoke without looking at me. You'll be back. Maybe, I said, when you tell the truth. He made a dismissive sound, the one he used for price quotes he didn't like. Truth is a luxury for people who don't have to make payroll. Truth is the only thing that makes the rest bearable. I moved onto Evan's couch that night. He lives above a bakery and the smell of sugar at dawn felt like a joke I didn't get yet. I took a temp job transcribing interviews for a local podcaster, then another logging footage for a nature series that paid in checks that cleared 3 weeks late. I filed the wage complaint with the labor department because the demand letter had been ignored, and the clinic lawyer said I'd done everything I could to resolve it privately. I didn't post about it. I didn't subtweet my father. I didn't put our mess into the mouths of people who wanted a show. I wrote it all down in a notebook with a red cover, each day's facts like stones I was laying across a river. The town didn't know what to do with me once I stopped standing behind the register. Some people looked away, others offered quiet congratulations, as if leaving a family business were a promotion. Some asked questions that weren't questions. How's the job hunt? Found your calling yet? Dad kept talking, I heard. He told a customer I'd decided to take a break from responsibility. He told the church men's group that I'd always had big dreams and small follow through. He told Aunt Rose that I'd put pen to paper to try to shake down my own father. She called me and said she wasn't sure what to think. I said she didn't have to decide in public. 3 weeks later, Dad's first response to the labor complaint came through a portal I had to log into with a code texted to my phone. It was full of phrases that felt familiar in the worst way: volunteered, family emergency, mutual understanding, room and board as compensation. He'd listed the times he'd bought groceries like they were wages. He'd tallied the nights I'd fallen asleep on the couch, and called it lodging. I printed his statement and put it in the red notebook, then added a copy of the rent checks I'd written him before I moved back, and the receipt from the day I bought the store a new receipt printer out of my own account, because the old one kept chewing paper. We had a mediation call, me on a chair in Evan's kitchen, Dad in the store office, a neutral person trying to translate our 2 languages into something that resembled a settlement. The mediator asked about hours, about tasks, about whether I'd had a choice. When Dad said he could have left any time, I heard the pause in the mediator's breath. When I played the voicemail, there was another pause, longer. Mr. Roy, the mediator said, Careful. Why did you present a decision as mutual, when your son hadn't agreed? Because he's my son, Dad said, and I could see him in my mind, sitting up straighter, searching for the old magic. Because I knew better. In the end, it didn't turn into court. The clinic lawyer said my documentation was clean enough, that a judge would likely order payment, but that I had to decide whether I wanted the extra months of escalation. The mediator floated a number, Dad scoffed and floated a lower one. I countered with my hours, times a rate we both knew was below what I would have earned in the city. He agreed, finally, not because he recognized the truth, but because he wanted the conversation to end. He never said the words I wanted. I'm sorry, I lied. I made you small to feel big. He wrote a check, and when I picked it up at the store, he slid it across the counter like he was selling me a length of rope. Happy now, he said. No, I said, but I'm done being held. I didn't get my original job back. That door was closed in a way that made my chest ache, when I let myself think about it. But the manager, my almost boss, introduced me to a friend running a small team, working on an investigative podcast about water rights. The pay wasn't great. The credit line wouldn't make anyone's LinkedIn jealous. But on my third day, I drove out with a reporter to a farmhouse where a woman was collecting rain in barrels because the well had gone bad. And we sat at her kitchen table and listened to her story, and I felt something in me line up again with the world. Mom comes to see me sometimes, bringing Tupperware with food I definitely don't need, and news I didn't ask for. She doesn't defend him as much now. She tells me about the days he is quiet, about the week he went to the back office, and stayed there until the sign on the door flipped from open to closed and he hadn't moved. She says he's tired. I say I am too. We sit there with our parallel truths, and drink tea neither of us finishes. People still ask me what happened. I say, my dad needed me, and I showed up. Then he needed me to be smaller than what I'd worked for. I decided not to. Sometimes that ends the conversation. Sometimes they lean in like they want a neater conclusion, a moral we can laminate and pin to the bulletin board. I don't have one. I have a red notebook full of facts, a bank account with money that is mine because I insisted, a job that is less shiny than the one I lost but more honest than the story I was living. I have a father who might someday say the words I asked for and might not. I have a mother who hugs me longer than she used to. I have a sister who picks up on the first ring and says, "Tell me everything," and then listens until I run out. On the last page of the notebook I wrote a line that felt both like a promise and a warning. You can love someone and refuse to be the version of yourself that makes their story easier. I go back to it when the room tilts and the old narrative tries to pull me in like a tide. I read it out loud in the quiet kitchen above the bakery, with the smell of sugar rising through the floorboards, and wait for my breathing to settle into something that sounds like my own. Follow me for more stories.